So today I'd like to talk about an opportunity that I have recently gotten, which is teaching youth baseball, which has been a ton of fun. The kids are great and a lot of fun to work with. But another thing is I get to dork out about all the variability in their movement patterns. Uh, One of the things that I think is a problem in baseball and in developing youth players is our inability to correct bad form early on. This is a challenge mainly because when you look at the earliest entry into Little League at 7 or 8 years old, you're not having high quality sports scientists do any of the coaching. You're having someone's dad or mom or someone helping out. So these are people who are already maybe not the most qualified and not really able to pick out bad form and correct bad form. And even if they were, you have to bear in mind that these kids are 6 or 7 years old and they might not listen. They might not care as much. This becomes interesting and an issue because throwing is not exactly an incredibly easy thing to pick up. This is a relatively complex motor pattern that you're asking of these kids throughout their development. And kids at this stage are pretty uncoordinated, or they can be. They're still learning how to move their bodies. So, on top of learning how to move their bodies, they're also learning how to move it this specific way to get this specific result, which is a challenge. What does this look like? Maybe if it's left unchecked. We'll turn to an example from my former teammate in JV, Giannis. For those of you unfamiliar with baseball mechanics, let me go and highlight a key point here. Everything all right up to this point, and then whoa! What is going on here? Look at how far forward that elbow is, and then look at how high up that release point is. This is a pretty inefficient way to throw a baseball, and not really what I would teach anyone. But this is what Giannis learned when he was around 7 or 8 years old, and either the muscle memory kicked in, he was never corrected, or he refused to be corrected, and this is how he threw entering high school ball. This is an issue because Giannis is 6'2" and a lefty, so we really wanted him to pitch. But shockingly, being a pitcher requires you to have a pretty good understanding and ability to follow through on throwing and being very efficient in that task. So, Giannis tried to pitch, but with his inability to efficiently transfer energy into the pitch, he had issues with velocity and control, and that made him a pretty poor pitcher. So we had to turn to some other kids. Now, how does this relate to Little League? I mentioned that this is probably the result of throwing issues being left unchecked by people who maybe weren't able to parse out that it was an issue. There could have been a number of reasons that Giannis is throwing the way he is now. But how can we fix it? We have the opportunity to look at youth players and parse out, hey, is that good throwing mechanics? Is that bad throwing mechanics? We have the ability. But what's the problem that we end up seeing? We end up seeing a lot of coaches, for a number of reasons, really focusing on results. During game time and even during practices, a lot of what you hear is just throw strikes, get that pitch a little lower, or maybe to their fielders, hit your cutoff man, hit them in the chest, make good throws. These are all result-oriented feedback and suggestions. Now, this becomes an issue for development because we know from the Janelle paper and further from this article I have on the screen, that was a reference article for the Janelle paper. We know that when people are unfamiliar with a motor task and when they're first learning it, the best results for learning that they get is when they get knowledge of performance. Why do I move this part of my body? Where do I move it? When they get specific cueing on how to move their body, when, where, why, how. This is what's going to lead to the most success for people learning fundamentals of these complex motor patterns. Knowledge of results can be effective for a higher level player, maybe higher level high school or college athlete. Then you can start talking about, I need a little more velocity, I need a little bit more spin, I need this location, that location, whatever it might be. But us as coaches right now in Little League are not focused on mechanics. We are focused entirely on results, which leads to poor player development and not giving kids the best chance to continue playing the sport that they love. My question to you is, Is this a similar developmental problem to any other sports? I have a primarily baseball background, so I'd be curious to see if there are any other sports having issues developing players' mechanics.